Good evening. I'm Amy Woods, the Executive Director of Alumni Relations at Marist, and a graduate from the class of 1997. We're very excited to present this webinar tonight with host Gilda Bonanno. I would first like to let you know this is the first time we are using Cisco WebEx, and I apologize in advance for any kinks. We hope after tonight, they'll go more smoothly, so I thank Gilda in advance for being patient with us. But it is a product that the college is using universally for all of its faculty and staff. So we're hoping it goes well tonight. If you encounter any audio issues, you do have the option to dial in by telephone. I provided that number and code in the chat box. I think some folks have already used it, I can see. Due to the number of participants, I think we have around 75 expected. I have muted all the lines except for mine and Gilda's. We are going to reserve the chat option for any technical issues you have or general questions for the Marist staff who are also listening in. And we're going to use the Q&A feature for questions that you have for Gilda. Our team will browse through those questions throughout the evening and provide Gilda with as many of them as possible. There will be a brief survey on your screen. I'm hoping there will be. As I said, this is the first time with WebEx. At the conclusion of the webinar with 5 questions. So if you have a minute, it would be extremely helpful for us to hear your feedback. So now I'd like to introduce our host. Gilda Bonanno graduated from Marist in 1993 as the valedictorian of her class. She is now a professional speaker, consultant, and facilitator who serves as a trusted advisor to executives and entrepreneurs to transform their communication, presentation, and leadership skills. She is also a member of the Alumni Association Executive Board. Since 2006, she has run her own business and worked with executives and entrepreneurs on 4 continents, from Chicago to Shanghai and Rio to Rome, including GE, Travelers, Praxair, ASSA ABLOY, Wells Fargo, and Yale University. Gilda has delivered thousands of in-person programs. Her YouTube channel has received over 2 million views, and her digital newsletter has reached subscribers in over 45 countries since 2008. Gilda, thank you in advance for spending time with all of us this evening and for sharing your expertise.
Thank you so much, Amy, and welcome everyone to our webinar tonight. I'm so excited to be here virtually with all of you and getting a chance to speak with you as we're going through this very unprecedented and difficult time. It's wonderful to see so many members of the Marist community coming together. So tonight is going to be about you getting some practical, actionable tips that you can use as a leader. So I do this webinar on a topic that I normally speak on in person. And I think because of the crisis we're going through, what I'm calling leadership in the time of Corona, for those English majors listening, that's a play off Love in the Time of Cholera, the wonderful novel by the Nobel Prize winning Gabriel Garcia Marquez. But this leadership presence topic is crucial to us anytime we're leading, anytime we're having corporate meetings or we're having our regular day-to-day life. But it's even more important now when we're in an unprecedented work-life change and global crisis. Leadership becomes even more important. So my goal tonight is to give you some actionable steps and tips that you can use tomorrow as we go through our day, and also when the crisis is past and we're moving into whatever our new reality is. So we're going to cover what is leadership presence, and then the 3 C's of leadership presence and communications, and that are confidence, competence, and composure. And as Amy said, if you have any questions, just type them in the Q&A box, which you can find either at the bottom or the far right of your screen, and I'll handle those periodically throughout the webinar. So in the days before Corona, which seemed like, boy, it seemed like a different world, right? We actually met in person. You sat next to your team. You might even touch. You might actually shake hands and share food. You might even hug people. In fact, I was at a Marist Alumni Executive Board meeting the week before the shutdowns began, and we actually shook hands and did some elbow bumps and fist bumps. And that was actually the last meeting that I was at. And as you heard from the introduction, I'm usually on a plane, train, or automobile going somewhere, but I've been grounded, obviously, like many of you, since this started. And so after Corona, we are now worrying about finding toilet paper and other supplies. We're working from home. We're homeschooling our children. We're wearing masks and dealing with the very real concerns for our healthcare workers and for those in our community who are sick or who have passed away, and really dealing with unprecedented changes. But through it all, we have certain best practices in leadership that will carry us through and help us be more effective as we come together to deal with this. And so I wanted to just share with you what I'm calling hand washing for the soul. We all know about hand washing, and we sing whatever song we sing, happy birthday or something more hip when we wash our hands. But I wanted to remind us as we're getting started about hand washing for the soul. What can we do ourselves that we can use to stay sane and calm? So just as a reminder, we're practicing physical distancing. I know it's called social distancing, but I'm in this small movement. We're trying to rename it to physical distancing because we want us to stay 6 feet apart from people physically, but we want to be socially connected. We have to prioritize our self-care. That's rest, nutrition, hydration, exercise. And yes, ice cream and candy can count as nutrition. I'm guilty of that as much as anyone, but also getting some good food and getting some rest. It's important to focus on what you can do and what you can control, taking small steps. And sometimes that small step is you got up and you showered. Sometimes the small step is you emailed a friend, right? It doesn't have to be large and grandiose. Those small steps are whatever we can do at the time. To practice gratitude, to be grateful. If we're on this webinar tonight that tells us we have some technology, we have computers, we have the Marist community, we have our health if we're able to dial into this call, we have our families, and so to be grateful for that. And during this week, particularly, which Christians celebrate as Holy Week and Jewish people celebrate as Passover, it's a good time to rediscover our spirituality, our connection with each other, and our connection with nature, if we have faith, to rediscover that and to spend some time focusing there. To also limit our news consumption. I don't know about you, but I cannot keep the news on 24/7. It makes me stressed. So I limit it. I have a couple of sources I read more than I watch. I'd rather read the summary of the speech or read the summary of the news conference rather than watch it. And then also helping others in whatever way that you can do that. Again, small steps, checking on a neighbor. If you're making the trek to the grocery store, asking someone if you could pick up eggs or milk for them and make it a little easier. So just reminding of hand washing for the soul, because that's important for us to feel good. It's hard to be an effective leader and to communicate effectively if we're not feeling good and safe. All right, so let's start off with this question: what is leadership presence? We talk about this a lot. Sometimes we call this executive presence. So I want to use a very specific definition. And by the way, somebody asked if I would be sharing my slides. What we're actually going to do midway through the webinar is we're going to send out a link to a handout that has all the information that's contained in the slide. So you will have all the content from the slides that you can use. So the what? What is leadership presence? I define it, this is a common definition, not just mine personally, but one that I like to use. It's what people perceive about you and your ability to lead and influence others. So 3 words are important in this definition. It's perception, right? What people perceive. So there's the reality, what you think you're doing, your intention, but then there's what people actually perceive about that. And it's what they perceive about your ability to lead and influence others. So let's keep that in mind as we go through the different steps to focus on. Leadership presence is essential for everyone. And I know we have a variety of folks joining us tonight, from grads back in last century like me and folks a little older than me, as well as some current Marist students. Leadership presence is essential for each and every one of us, regardless of whether we're a nonprofit or education or if we are in corporate or whatever field we're in. Leadership presence is essential for each of us. So there's a lot of components of leadership presence. We can think of it as a puzzle, and the one that I want to focus on is communication, right? There's other elements we're not going to focus on tonight, like strategy, execution, integrity, vision, appearance, right? These are other important leadership presence components, but I'm going to focus tonight specifically on communication because I really believe this is the essential link. It's the missing puzzle piece between abilities and leadership success. Because one thing is to have the abilities and the skills, but remember, if leadership presence is about perception, you have to be able to communicate by your words and actions that you're leading others. So I think leadership communication is the essential missing link. So the when of leadership presence is really in all settings. And this slide predates Corona, but even more so now, in all settings is really true. Whether you're giving a presentation or having a meeting or having a one-on-one or networking, and it's for live in person as well as virtual, and also for Q&A. So as we go through tonight, I'll share best practices that are meant for both in person, and then I will also tailor it a little bit towards virtual, because many of us are working from home now and having virtual connections and virtual communications. And again, feel free to ask questions at any point in the Q&A. It won't interrupt the flow of the webinar. I'll stop periodically and collect those, and we'll answer them. So the why of leadership presence, you know, in the old days, not so long ago, we would think, you know, if I just do the work, if I just keep my head down and do the work, people will recognize how good I am, and I'll get promoted, and all of those wonderful things will happen. We know that's not really enough. It's not enough just to do the work. We want to be recognized as a leader, and this is regardless of title. In fact, a couple of years ago, I was on campus presenting for one of our management capping classes. So I was speaking to graduating seniors. And I said, you know, each and every one of the students was capable of being a leader, regardless of title, whether they were most junior person at the company they were starting at or they were the most senior. It's not about what it says on your business card or if you have a nameplate on your door. It's not about what it says in your email signature as your title. Anybody is capable of being a leader. So here's a wonderful quote I love from John Quincy Adams, who was our 6th U.S. president. And as a Marist history grad, I've got a shout out, of course, to my history faculty. This quote really exemplifies why we can all be leaders. If your actions inspire others to dream more, learn more, do more, and become more, you are a leader. By that definition, each of us is capable of being a leader. Because what is this about? It's really about people listening to you and taking your ideas seriously, regardless of what you look like or where you came from or how old you are. It's about being able to communicate your ideas in a way that people take you seriously. And we also don't want to waste any opportunity to build our brand. We talk a lot about branding being what people say about us when we're not in the room, right? And branding is based on perception, what people perceive about us. So when we're communicating in these settings, in these meetings, virtual or in person, we have opportunities every single time to build our brand as leaders. So we don't want to waste those opportunities. I think of communication as our ace. It's really something that sets us apart because a lot of people are not as comfortable as they could be with communication. And when you master this, it's like having an ace because it allows you to be way more effective than you would be ordinarily. So let's get started with the first idea. The first C is confidence. And anytime I teach any kind of communication or leadership, I always start off with confidence because this is the most important element. And the first idea in confidence is really to mind your mind. And that means focusing on what you're telling yourself about your skills and ability. Because our goal in confidence is to be confident, not cocky. We all know the difference. We can see it's hard to define, but you know it when you see it. All right, so our goal is to be confident, not cocky. And if you are nervous, if you're uncomfortable, if you're anxious, it's really about minding your mind. It's about replacing any negative voice you have in your head that tells you you're not fill in the blank enough. You're not smart enough. You're not old enough. You're not skilled enough. You're not experienced enough. Oftentimes we have that negative voice in our head and it makes us anxious. It saps our confidence. So if that's applicable to you, it's a question of minding your mind and replacing that negative voice in your head with something I call a positive mantra. That's just a phrase you can use over and over to remind yourself of what you are and who you are. It could be something like, I've got this, I'm prepared, I'm eager to learn, I'm ready to share what I know. I'm excited to be here. I know I can contribute. Whatever it is that helps you focus on positive, focus on your skills, what you can do, as opposed to what you're not and what you're lacking. And that will really help boost your confidence. The second confidence idea focuses around your body language, right, and how we communicate other than with our words. So take a look at this picture here on the screen. What is the real message you get from this person? The word bubble is fine. It says, I'm so happy to be here today. But she looks like she's got toothache or she's in pain. She certainly doesn't look happy to be here. And the bottom line here is when your words and your body language, your nonverbals, when they don't match, the audience, whether that's one person or 1,000 people, we get confused and just might believe the body language over your words. So you might look at this and say, wow, she's not happy to be here, even though her words tell a different story. So when we're talking about body language, there's several different components: eye contact, your voice, your facial expressions, your gestures, your posture, your movement. All of this combines to communicate meaning. And it's about varying your body language to match your meaning. So your words and your body language tell the same story. So it's not about being fake or being an actor or pretending. It's really about making sure you're congruent, making sure you're aligned. How you are communicating with your words and the rest of your body tells the same story. So a couple of examples. You want to smile. Now, smiling is important when we're sharing good news, of course, but what about in the time of Corona? How can we smile in the time of Corona? And, I'm calling it that as opposed to COVID-19 because, again, I think it's a little bit of a play on love in the time of cholera, but I also like that it sounds more like a beer than an infectious disease. So I'm sticking with Corona just because I think it's a little bit, I like to poke a little fun at it. That's how I'm handling it. So you'll hear me refer to it as Corona. So how can we smile in the time of Corona? That's an important question. Obviously, if we're announcing bad news or updates about layoffs or furloughs, you're not going to be giggling and laughing. But a human smile, when you're communicating, expressing empathy, when you're listening to people, that shortens distance. And you can see it on video as well as hear it in somebody's voice. So smile, make eye contact, because that's considered respectful, and share your message, whatever that is. You also want to remember your mom was right. Stand up straight, sit up straight. Your gestures, your movement, your posture, it does make a difference. And you can't see me tonight. And we chose to do that because of bandwidth issues. We didn't want to have any issues with us seeing you and you seeing me. You can't see me, but I'm actually standing up as I do this. And I'm smiling, even though you can't see me. And I hope you can hear that in my voice. So standing up straight or sitting up straight helps us present more confidently, and it helps us feel more confident as well, and makes the voice sound more energetic. You want to be energetic and command the room, and you don't do that by pounding on the table and screaming. You do that by standing strong and standing tall or sitting tall, smiling, focusing on people, being engaging, being connected with them, whether you can see them all or not. It helps you to command the room, not in a way of power, but in the way of connection. Confidence idea number 3 is that your voice matters. So you want to speak loudly enough to be heard. And this is something I talk about even with in-person presentations, but it becomes even more important when we're communicating virtually. So speaking loudly enough so people can hear. How loud? Depends on who you're talking to, what background noise there might be. And you want to avoid the dreaded uptalk. I realize I'm missing an opening quotes on uptalk there for the grammar folks in the room who've noticed that. Note to self, prepare that for next time. But what is uptalk? Well, uptalk is this unfortunate habit that some people have of making every sentence sound like a question. So their voice goes up at the end of a sentence. And so everything sounds like a question. Here's my idea. My name is Gilda. Here's what I'm bringing to the table. And it makes you sound like everything's a question. You don't know what you're talking about. If you're on a video call or if you're on an audio call, you're not in person, this is even more exacerbated because all we have to judge your idea by is how you present it vocally. And so uptalk can really be detrimental to your confidence. So here's some tips for phone calls, which we're doing more and more as we're working from home. Your voice is all you have. So you do need to speak loudly enough to be heard. And I would recommend if you're speaking or presenting in a more formal way on that phone call, as opposed to just a check-in meeting, to stand up. Make sure you're smiling. Put a mirror there or turn your camera on just so you can see yourself to remember to smile. Use a clear, consistent phone line. Wow, does it make you long for the days of landline phones? So we cannot have the call drop because everybody is using the internet and the voice over IP phones at the same time. So have a clear, consistent phone line. Use a headset or headphones if that helps. Be aware of your background noise. Some of our headsets are super sensitive and they will pick up any background noise from typing to birds outside the window. So be mindful of that. Mute yourself when appropriate. And by the way, always assume the mute button is broken. Assume that we can hear you. When you're waiting for everybody to join the call and you're kind of doing stuff around the house, assume we can hear you hit the laundry or the dishwasher or yell at your kids or get the dog in. Assume we can hear all that. So assume the mute button is broken. Don't do or make any noise that you wouldn't want us to hear. And if you're going to be using video, which a lot of us are now doing through meetings and different software, practice using the software. In fact, for this WebEx webinar, Amy and her team, we did a practice yesterday, so we ran through any potential pitfalls. And for video, shower and get dressed. There's a lot of fun memes floating around the internet about people who are wearing shorts on the bottom and a nice dress shirt or nice top. I am for fully dressing, so I would recommend you dress appropriately, but I'll let you not wear shoes if you want. You can go barefoot if that's easier, especially if it's getting warmer. Be aware of your background. What's behind you in the video? You don't have to go out and get a green screen if you don't have one and put one of those Zoom backgrounds that makes it look like you're on the beach. But beware of what's in the background that could be distracting or confusing or something. Prepare for bandwidth issues. When we did this practice yesterday, the slides advanced a lot slower for people watching it because every Marist student was on the system, I think, at the same time doing their classes. Tonight it's a lot better. So be prepared for the bandwidth issues. I'm actually set up here with a direct wire to the internet. So I'm not using the Wi-Fi in my home office because I wanted to make sure I don't have any connectivity issues. Be flexible, patient, and calm. Things will happen, they will go wrong, be patient. And smile and monitor your face even when you're not speaking. So you know how sometimes somebody else is speaking and you may not have a poker face or you may be thinking of what's coming next and you get that dazed expression or even an angry look on your face. Be aware of that because on video we can see it. So just monitor your face and be mindful of what's going on. It's a great quote from Carl Lewis, the 9-time Olympic gold medalist. If you don't have confidence, you'll always find a way not to win. Okay, before we move on to the second C, which is competence, let's take some questions. So Amanda, can you tell me what questions have come in as I've been going through? What questions do we have at this point, Amanda?
Sure, of course. We just have one question so far, and it starts with a little bit of a preface. As no one's perfect and we should all be constantly trying to improve ourselves, do you have advice on distinguishing our imposter bias from legitimate self-criticism?
That's a great question. Thank you. So imposter bias, which says I'm not good enough, I feel like a fake, soon they're going to realize I'm a fake and I really don't know what I'm doing, from a legitimate desire to learn. A great question. And I think it comes from two things. One, you have to know yourself. You have to be really cognizant of what you are good at and where your gaps are. And two, it comes from feedback from people you respect. So sometimes we have blind spots. And having mentors, maybe bosses or friends or family members who are able to share with us in a positive way, but a truthful way, where our gaps are. So, you know, it would be silly if I walked into the room and said, I'm a brain surgeon. I know how to do, you know, wow, I'm good. My mantra is I know how to do brain surgery. Clearly, I don't know how to do brain surgery. And I know that's an extreme example, but for the purposes of illustration. But I could go in and say, I'm able to learn more about some of the health issues that lead to brain surgery or some of the conditions that might require brain surgery, right? So I think we have to be really clear about what we know, what we're good at, and where we're still learning. So we never say, I'm the best in the world at ABC, because we're probably not, and that's not real. That's more ego speaking. But to say, I'm learning this, so if you're a student or if you're new in your career or you switch careers, to say, I'm learning this, but I have experience from this past job or this past internship that's helping me here, or I'm a good learner. Just having those skills and those attitudes, I know how to learn. I like to learn. I'm open. I believe that my mind is capable of understanding, right? So having that plasticity of mind and a belief that we are capable of learning and growing regardless of our age, that I think makes the big difference between this imposter syndrome and really being committed to self-development. I hope that answers your question. Any other questions at this point, Amanda?
Yeah, we actually have two more. One, how do you know that you're speaking loud enough?
Great question. Okay, this is where that positive, that feedback loop is super important. So you didn't see me do this, but as soon as I started speaking, I have a back channel with Amy, and sorry, Amy, I'm telling all our secrets here, but Amy and I are texting each other outside the system, so it's not recorded, but I said, Amy, how's my audio? Can you hear me? We did that before we started, and we did it while I was starting. So I know that she's my check. If I'm too loud, or if I'm not loud enough, I have somebody whose opinion I know I'm going to get. So you're going to ask somebody, and in certain cases more than one person, am I loud enough? Because people have different connectivity and different kind of phones. So yeah, you're going to get that feedback from someone, because there's no way to know otherwise. There's absolutely no way to know. Hope that helps. Amanda, what's the other question?
Just any tips that you have to stand out in an online group meeting.
All right, I'll give you the funny one first. Get dressed. Okay, after we say that. And I'm assuming you're laughing. Thank you for laughing for that. How do you stand out in an online meeting? It's really about, like an in-person meeting, what do you have to say? So it doesn't mean you have the craziest background or you're wearing the craziest shirt or, you know, anything like that. It's really the quality of your mind. What are you asking? You don't have to be presenting something. You could ask a really thoughtful question, which you've thought about ahead of time, knowing the topic of that meeting. You've asked a thoughtful question, or you've brought up an interesting idea. So you stand out by thinking about your brand. What is it you want to be known for? Are you the idea person? Are you the person who gets stuff done? Are you the communicator? Are you the connector? Are you the numbers guy? Are you the woman who handles PR? Like what is it you are an expert? And that ties in beautifully to our competence idea. You're going to become an expert. And so whatever that expertise is, that's what you build on in those online meetings. And that allows you to stand out. And by the way, if you happen to be comfortable with virtual technology like Zoom or WebEx, that's your new superpower. All right, any Marist student on this call, and I know we have a couple, who you're already comfortable, you're learning this way, you're used to communicating this way, this is your superpower in the workplace. Because as many of us over the age of 30 are finding out, not everybody's comfortable with this technology. So become an expert in a subject matter or in a service, right? Become the go-to person for that knowledge or service. And that will make you stand out. So you don't have to have the loudest voice in the room or the virtual room. It's really the quality of what you say. So I hope that helps. Amanda, any other questions?
None right now.
All right. Well, let's keep going on competence ideas, because this that question really tied into this nicely. How do you stand out? And so I want to share with you what I call the success formula. And that's knowledge plus communication equals success. Now, we know that a lot of people are smart. They have knowledge. They have expertise. But sometimes we say, you know, she's really smart in that area, but I can't put her in front of the customer because she rambles and goes off topic. Or we might say, you know, he's really an expert in that process, but we can't send him to the trade show. We can't have him represent us because he's really monotone and boring and people get disengaged very quickly. Right, so people have knowledge, but they don't have communication. We also know people who have the opposite problem. They don't actually know anything, but they talk a good game. So they sound like they know what they're talking about. But then you ask a question, you realize there's no depth there. There's no knowledge. There's no true understanding. And so we want to avoid either of these problems because, frankly, in our society, the people who talk a good game get promoted a little faster than our smart people who can't communicate. But eventually, both of those folks get stuck in their careers because we realize that they don't have the whole package. So our goal is always to have knowledge and communication, to know something and to be able to communicate it to others. That's going to allow us to have success because, frankly, it's a rare combination. So as I said, you want to become the go-to credible person for your subject, your service, your product, your region, whatever it is that you know. Like, what is my service or subject? It's communication skills and leadership. This is what I live and breathe. This is what I want to be an expert in. Am I the best person in the world in it? No. Do I know everything? No. Am I perfect? No, absolutely not. But is this something I study, work hard on, spend my time learning about and sharing? Yes. This is what I want clients to call me for. All right, so that's what you want to be thinking about your brand. What are you the go-to for? Competence idea number 2 is to have a clear, concise message. Right, so as you're communicating, whether to one person or 1,000 people, you want to think in terms of message. It might fit on a billboard. It might be something that's quick and clear. And it's really about summarizing what it is you stand for, who you are, what you bring to the table. To think about what I call the communication golden rule. Communicate unto others as they want to be communicated to. So if you're presenting to the finance team, speak numbers to them. If you're talking to the sales team, speak sales metrics, but also customer to them. If you're talking to your R&D group, speak ideas, right? So think about who is your audience and communicate in a language that they understand. And speaking of communication, Amy, this would be a great time for you in the chat to send everybody the link to download the handout. So Amy's going to send that through. It's a link to the Marist site. It'll allow you to download the handout, which has all the information that I'm covering. All the content in my slides is in that handout.
All right, we'll try that now.
Right, and if there's any issues, you can just send it through in the chat. And again, don't worry if you don't get it. We will send an email out tomorrow to everybody, and I'll have the handout attached as well. So you will get it. So when you're communicating your competence, you want to make sure you don't ramble or go over your time. This is really important virtually because we have a lot of things on our computer that can distract us. So if I'm in a real meeting with you in person and we're sitting around the table and you're rambling and going over your time and boring me, I'm probably just going to keep paying attention. I might surreptitiously check my phone. If we're a company that allows people to look at emails during meetings, which is not a great idea, but if that's what we allow, I might look at my emails. But if I'm in my home office and we're all virtual and you can't see me and you're rambling and going over your time, I'm checking Facebook, I'm checking my email, I'm looking up recipes, I'm checking in with my friends, I'm checking on the kids, I'm doing a lot of stuff. So don't ramble or go over your time or you will lose your audience, you will lose your credibility. And competence idea number 3, your words matter. And particularly when you are virtual and you're not in person, we don't have any other body language, what you say really does matter. So you want to cut out your filler words. Your I know, you like, well, not you like, although it could be for some of us, like, you know, like really, kinda, awesome. Anything that's a repetitive word that you use that doesn't really have any meaning. A few of them are fine, but if every other word is a filler word, that really gets exacerbated over the phone. We can start playing buzzword bingo. People will count how many times you say like really in a sentence or sort of. You also want to cut out what I call minimizers. These are words like, I'm sorry, I know this is a stupid idea. I'm not sure if this is right, or, you know, I was just thinking, these are words that are designed to minimize you. So going back to confidence, if you're not feeling confident, your language is likely to be full of these minimizers, which not only say I don't feel smart or confident, but now I'm going to share my lack of confidence with everybody. So remember, it's not about being cocky. It's about being confident and knowing what you know and knowing what you don't know and making sure your language reflects that. So if you have an idea, instead of saying, I know this is a stupid idea and you guys have probably thought about it and I'm just spitballing here, but just say, here's an idea I thought about. Okay, here's what I'm thinking. What do you guys think? So just present it. Don't have any of the minimizing preambles. A great quote from Brian Tracy, who's a personal development expert. I actually had the pleasure of meeting Brian a couple of years ago at a meeting. He was wonderful. As you would expect, he was in person as he appears to be in his book. And he has this wonderful quote that says, "Never say anything about yourself you do not want to come true." And I think that's something we should keep in mind. So let's move on to the third C, and that is composure. And I will get to questions, so if you have them, please type them in the Q&A, and we'll definitely make sure we get to them. I promise to stay on the line until I've answered every single question you have. So composure idea number one is to choose your reaction. So what is that reaction going to be? Is it going to be anger, frustration, confusion? And we might think, well, do we really have a choice? Sometimes somebody just pushes your buttons or says the wrong thing and you flip. No, and that is true. But it's really about staying calm under pressure. And in those moments, when that action happens, we have a nanosecond to pause, think, and breathe and control our reaction. Now, again, we're on a learning journey. We have to work at this. I certainly have to work at this. I know many of us do, to control our reactions. Now, this is in normal leadership, right? Now we have leadership in the time of Corona. How much more important does this get? When every action that's thrown at you is a negative news item, a statistic. If you live in Connecticut like me, or right over the border from Westchester County, so New York and Connecticut, really the epicenter of the coronavirus in the United States, after Washington State and a couple of our other states, the news is not positive all the time. It's rarely positive. If I responded to that emotionally every single time, I might be justified, but how is that going to help me as a leader if I'm always upset, stressed, frustrated, angry, scared, anxious? Those are all normal reactions, but that can't be my default setting as a leader, because people are watching you. They're looking to you as a leader for guidance on how we're going to deal with this. And if everything we do is just an emotional reaction, then we're not going to be as effective and helpful to each other as we could be. So composure idea number two is to prepare and practice. And this sounds a little funny, like how do you practice? Well, you practice how to introduce yourself quickly. I have a video on this on my YouTube channel, and clearly this is a hot topic because there's over a million views on that video alone. How to introduce yourself quickly. If you're at a networking meeting or you're going to a virtual networking, how do you say something about yourself? How do you say a message? How to talk about what you're working on with strangers or with people in your team or with your boss or your clients. How to do that in a concise, clear way that respects the communication golden rule, that communicates in a way those people want to be communicated to. You can prepare and practice that. It's like an interview, right? Those of you who've gone through job interviews, you can predict and prepare for about 80 to 90% of the questions you're going to be asked. The other 10% you rely on your experience to get you through in the moment. But I think in our interactions, we can prepare for a lot of these commonly done conversations. What are you working on? Who are you? What do you bring to the table? Can we prepare to deal with a crisis like Corona? Well, yes and no. I have colleagues who work in crisis communication who have always been encouraging their clients to prepare crisis communication plans, to have draft press releases ready to go, to have plans in place if there are natural disasters, other kinds of negative events, viruses, things like that. So you might not be able to prepare specifically for Corona, but could you prepare for how you might handle a difficult situation, right? So we can't predict the future. All we're trying to do is be clear and concise and prepared to the point possible to handle our composure in that moment. If we're going to get angry, we choose to get angry. If we're going to be frustrated, we want to choose to be frustrated. We don't want it to just happen all the time accidentally. And composure idea number three is to be authentic. We throw this idea around a lot, but what does that mean? It really means to be yourself. It really means to be your best self. So you don't have to be perfect. You don't have to have all the answers. And I know as we're seeing a lot of leaders rise and fall during this time of Corona, right? We're seeing, we all have our favorite governors perhaps, and we all have our favorite newscasters that we listen to, and you know, We see how people respond in a time of crisis. We don't have to have all the answers. We don't have to be perfect, but we have to be our best self. It's really about being present for people, being engaging for people, but don't expect yourself to be perfect. People don't need you to be perfect. It's unrealistic, and it forces them to feel like they have to be perfect too. So it's really about being yourself, but being the best version of yourself that is learning and growing and coming to deal with new situations as they arise. And so I want to share this last quote. This is by Eleanor Roosevelt. And when I was a new Marist grad, I had the privilege of working at the Franklin Roosevelt Presidential Library. It was really my first real job, and it was one of the best jobs I ever had, and got to examine the papers of Eleanor and Franklin and hold some of his speeches and listen to some of his fireside chats. And by the way, the Marist community has worked with the FDR Library to digitize all of that collection. So you can go to the FDR Library website and you can listen to his fireside chats. Might not be a bad idea to do right about now in the time in our nation's history to listen to some FDR fireside chats. But this quote by Eleanor Roosevelt, I'm going to read it because I love it so much. You gain strength, courage, and confidence by every experience in which you really stop to look fear in the face. You're able to say to yourself, I have lived through this horror. I can take the next thing that comes along. You must do the thing you think you cannot do. And I think that's what we're all called on to do. We're looking fear in the face. We are living through this horror. We never thought we'd have to do this, and here we are. And so that's what makes us leaders, if we can look fear in the face and move forward. So before I get to questions, let me handle the 10 ways to demonstrate leadership presence in the time of Corona. Number 1, communicate often with your teams. And again, the team could be people who formally report to you or people who just look to you for guidance. Listen and empathize. Number 2, set reasonable expectations and be flexible. So the plans that we had before might need to be thrown out the window. Let's be flexible and be reasonable about what we can expect. Provide frequent feedback to your team. Let them know how they're doing, how things are going. Number 4, be clear when video is required versus not required. Because video can be challenging when everyone's working and studying from home. Who gets the quiet room? Who gets the room with the camera? Who gets the room with a good background? Who gets to use the bandwidth, right? Who wants to put on makeup, ladies, or get their hair done to be on video? So be mindful, as good as video is and as nice it is to see people, I'm not sure that every meeting has to be video. Number 5, be mindful of employees' work-life balance. Don't send non-urgent emails after hours. I'm going to apologize to the alumni team. I did that this weekend. I was working on something and I shot out a couple of emails. I think it was Sunday night. And after I did it, I thought, oh, why did I do that? I meant to queue them up for sending Monday morning. Because I'm working on it Sunday night, that doesn't mean I expect other people to respond. So don't send non-urgent emails just because you can. Just queue them up to be sent out during regular working hours. Number 6, let people work on something they care about. And that's different for each person. But let them work on a pet project, something that is motivating. Because I know nobody's quitting their job right now, but when this is over, and it will be over, we're going to see a mass exodus from companies where employees felt disrespected and uncared for by their management. So let people work on something they care about as a means to retain them post-corona. Number 7, be open to creative and disruptive possibilities. For some companies on the phone, working from home was considered too disruptive to be done. Can't be done in our industry, not going to be done here. And I'm not naming names, but you know who you are. But suddenly we're working from home by order of the governors. And so we have to be open to these creative possibilities. So what other quote unquote crazy ideas are there out there that might help your organization be more effective? Number 8, don't dump your fears and anxieties on your team. Work through those with your peers and management. So you don't always have to be stressing out onto your team, right? You want to give them some support. Of course you can let them know you're stressed, but don't dump all your fears and anxieties on them, because then what do they do with them? Well, they go share them with their families. And there's no work-life balance anymore. It's all in the same messy space. So we don't want to be dumping those fears and anxieties on the team unless absolutely necessary. Number 9, beware the rumor mill and be alert to what we call aftershocks. We think people have adjusted to a change, and then there's an aftershock. There's some backsliding. So beware the virtual rumor mill. I heard, or so-and-so said, two people talk to the boss and they get two different answers. Be very careful with that rumor mill because it can be very destructive. And number 10, stay positive. Remember your hand washing for the soul and how you can share that best with your team and your employees. So our choice is between panic and calm. And sometimes we're going to choose panic, and that's all right. Most of the time, we should choose calm because that's what our teams need, particularly now, but really all the time. Steady, calm leadership that shows that we can communicate confidently, that we know what we're doing, that we have competence, and that we can maintain our composure even in times of panic. So it's about harnessing the power of your communications to build your leadership presence. So we're going to break for questions in a moment, but first I'm going to go to a final slide here and ask Amy. I know I just blew through a slide. I will go back to it. I want to make sure Amy gets a chance to talk about some other upcoming events that the Marist community has available. So Amy, if you could walk us through what we have upcoming, then I promise I'll go back to the slide I blew through and we'll handle all your questions.
Sure. So as everyone might imagine, our main role in alumni relations is to engage our alumni. So we've had to completely revamp our operation and take everything online as we can't all go to events and shake hands and clink glasses anymore right now. So we've been trying to come up with some opportunities for all of you that, appeals to everyone in different ways. So we kicked it off actually last week with a prayer from Brother Frank Kelly from Campus Ministry on Facebook Live. So we tried that out. But the nice thing with our Facebook page is that it's public. So you don't need a Facebook account to log in, and it was recorded. So it's available now for anyone who would like to go back and see Brother Frank's prayer. And he's going to help us put together some other prayers, different religions, different faiths in the near future. So keep an eye out for those. Of course, we had Gilda this evening, and we hope to hear from Gilda again in the future. Tomorrow, we have an alumna who is going to go through a yoga flow, about a 45-minute yoga flow on this product, the WebEx product. So we're hoping that goes okay. It's the middle of the day, noon tomorrow. Next week, the faculty from our teacher education department are putting together, I shouldn't say next week, I'm sorry, April 21st, a webinar that'll help families who are suddenly home with children and have to homeschool. So they're going to share their tips on how to accomplish that. And also in the meantime, at least 6 teacher ed faculty have put together short little video clips with tips on homeschooling and working with children at home. So we're going to gradually roll those out via email and social media. Later this month, hopefully we'll have a date soon on a completely different type of webinar with our resident historian, Dr. David Woolner from the history department. And I think Tom Wormuth, Vice President for Academic Affairs, Dean of Academic Affairs, will host that webinar, and they're going to talk about FDR as this month marks the 75th anniversary of FDR's death. So just some different things we're trying to roll out. We're taking ideas. We do have a website, a web page on our website where you can submit your ideas, but feel free to email us also if you have ideas for other events, as we could be doing this all the way into June for all we know, these webinar type style events and digital events. So that's my pitch, Gilda.
All right, thank you so much, Amy. And I want to just shout out to Chris Del Giorno and Amy Woods and the entire Alumni and Advancement team and Career Services who on a dime have pivoted to a completely virtual experience. And I was on a call, I think, with you last week when you guys came up with that idea of having tips from the education department for homeschooling, and you're making it happen. I mean, you are working literally around the clock, your team. So hats off to all of you who are working so hard to make sure that we still stay connected despite our inabilities to gather in person. So thank you, and a huge shout out to all of you for your hard work during this time. So I'm going to show this resource slide, and this will also be included in the email we send out to you tomorrow, and then I'm going to handle questions. 3 resources for you: the handout, which you can see on the chat, and we'll also send it in email tomorrow. If you'd like additional leadership and communication skills tips, you can text Confidence 2020 to the number you see on the screen. And I have a free course that I've made available to anybody who wants to opt in. Actually, there's no opt-in, there's no login, there's no password, you just download it. And that's about virtual presentations, how to develop and deliver an effective presentation over the phone. All right, so I'll leave that up there. And what questions do we have, Amanda?
All right, question one for you. How do you find the balance between using jargon for subject matter experts and using more simple terms for meeting members who may not be as knowledgeable?
Thank you. Love the question. And by the way, I will stay on the line as late as we need to answer every question, so don't worry about that. We will get to your question. Love that question. I think it's important to do a little of both. What's the balance? I would err more on the side of simple. Jargon is fine to show you're one of the cool kids, to show you're one of the in crowd. So I'm also a PMP, a project management professional, and we have our own special language, right? We talk about the triple constraints and our Gantt charts. And so if I'm talking to a group of folks who are PMs, project managers, I'm going to use a little of that lingo to show that I'm one of them. But I'm not going to use it with people who don't speak PM, who don't speak project management. And I'm not going to use it also with PMs all the time, because after a while, the words stop having meaning. So I would err on the side of clear and simple and demystifying jargon for non-experts. So speak in lay people's terms as much as possible. Use real words with real meaning most of the time. A little jargon here and there is fine. But if you're touching base and talking about what's in your wheelhouse and all this, after a while, we start to speak in these phrases that don't actually communicate anything. So great question. Jargon's fine a little bit, but it's like sugar. A little bit goes a long way.
Great.
Yeah.
This next question, I know you touched on it a bit with your communicate unto others slide, but the question is, what ways might your style or a leader's style vary depending on their audience? Oh,
great. Thank you. That was a question that we got submitted when somebody signed in, so I appreciate that you brought it up. Yeah, so it definitely does vary depending on the audience. However, can I quote Popeye here? I am what I am. All right. Sometimes it doesn't land as funny as it did in my head, but you are your brand. You are a consistent person. So you're not varying so much that different audiences don't recognize you. You're not one way with this group and a completely different way with another group. So you are your one consistent, authentic self. What you're varying is a little bit of that jargon that you might use, a little bit of what you focus on. Do you go more into details? Do you go more high level? Are you talking about strategy or tactics? So this is how your leadership style may vary depending on your audience, right? So you're the same person, you're a consistent leader. What you're varying is how you are communicating, how you are connecting and engaging to those people based on what they need and who they are. I hope that helps. It's a great question. Thank you.
This next question actually starts with a quote. I think the quote's from Charles Bukowski. Okay. Intelligent people are full of doubts, while stupid ones are full of confidence. With regard to cutting out minimizers, I'm reminded of that quote. We communicate reasonable hesitation without minimizing what we have to say.
I love it. Thank you so much for sharing that quote. That's great. I had not heard that before. Yeah, I think you can absolutely communicate humility and hesitation, right? I think you can absolutely communicate that while still being confident and not using minimizers. So it is not just semantics, right? But it's well, here's an idea. Do you think this might work? That's different than saying, I know this is a stupid idea you probably thought of before. Or, you know, I realize I'm new to this field. Here's something we used to do in my old field. I wonder if it would apply here. Let's explore that a little bit. So I think it's wonderful to be humble about what we know. In fact, a little humility goes a long way, and I think we can use it. But I think you don't have to use the minimizers in order to be humble about your knowledge. And by the way, confidence is not just about you. It's also about you enabling other people to feel confident, right? We want to follow you as a confident leader who's also humble about what they know and what they don't know, but it also enables other people to, for lack of a better term, stand in their power, to stand in their light and share their light and their ideas. So I think absolutely you can be humble about what you know and show, I wouldn't call it hesitation, but a natural question about whether or not this idea can work. Absolutely. So you don't have to say, this idea is definitely going to work. It's a question saying, here's something that we could try. What do you think? As opposed to, probably a stupid idea. You know, you hear those people who have a preamble of all negative minimizers for the first 3 or 4 sentences. I've stopped listening at that point. I want you to think your idea is important enough, and if it isn't, then don't share it. Right? It's okay if it's half-baked. You can say, this is half-baked, let's flesh it out a little bit more. So thank you so much for sharing that quote and for asking that question. Amanda.
In a different vein, how do you tactfully bring people back on topic who have gone off on a tangent?
Great question. That's a tough one. It's really about if it's a meeting and you're in charge of the meeting, I think you have the right and the authority and frankly the expectation that you will do that. So if it's my meeting, I will set ground rules at the beginning. If we're going to meet every week, I'm going to say, okay, can we all agree on what ground rules are going to help us have an effective meeting? Ground rules often include, if you're on a virtual meeting, always saying your name. This is Gilda, because otherwise people on the phone might not recognize your voice if there's a lot of people on the call. Ground rule might be how long our meetings are. And a ground rule would be, how do we handle tangents? And so I would often say, okay, do I have everybody's permission if we go off on a tangent just to bring us back? And everyone, of course, will say yes. And I will exercise that and say, hang on a second, I'm just exercising my ground rule here that we probably should get back on topic. And now the topic that we've gone off tangent about, if it's important, we need to handle it. Maybe we need to put it on a list to handle next time, or if it's important enough, we all decide we're going to come off the agenda and focus on this particular topic. But I think it's your responsibility as the leader of that team to keep people on time and keep them honest and keep them focused on the agenda and to allow the tangents to play out a little bit, but not to make you go off time and off topic, because then that wastes people's time. And that, frankly, is disrespectful because your meetings run over, and that's not showing support for your team. So I think you absolutely have to do it in a tactful way, but just call it out. And if it's not your meeting, it's a little harder. But if you've earned the respect of your colleagues, you can say, hey, folks, I just want to interrupt here. Can we get back to the point? Can we back to the question? But you've had to have a little bit of team respect in order to do that effectively. Thanks for that question. What else, Amanda?
Do you have any tips on how to balance being yourself with being professional?
Yeah, I think this is always a question we have to ask ourselves. What is professional? And it varies depending on your industry. We can think of it, let's make it very simple. Think about dress code, right? What works on Wall Street may not work on, during Fashion Week. It may not work in a law firm. What works in certain parts of the country, right? So just how we dress professional varies based on our job, based on our industry, based on our region. So also our conduct varies. I mean, there's certain things which are professional, language that is clear and unambiguous and clean, right? Language that is appropriate, not being disrespectful. That's always professional, right? To be respectful of people, to be aware of how you're interacting with people, to not discriminate. So I mean, there's certain things which are always professional, and then there's other things, how is your industry? How tight are people on time? Well, frankly, I think we should always be on time. But knowing your group, your team, you have to think about what is yourself and what of yourself doesn't fit into professional. Maybe it's only a couple of things. It shouldn't be a lot. Like, you shouldn't feel like you're leaving most of your personality at home to fit into some square box in some industry or in some company, because then maybe it's not the right fit if you feel like you can't be truly yourself. Now, we're going to be mindful here of how we are hanging out, having a beer with our friends, watching TV, or out at a nightclub versus how we are with the president of the college or with our CEO of the company. So there is a level of appropriateness, but I think if you're finding you're not yourself most of the time, you've got to ask yourself, are you in the right role, or is your behavior outside of work just not what it needs to be? Because I think it shouldn't be that much of a struggle to be quote unquote professional. But thank you for that question. That's an interesting one I don't often get. Amanda, what else?
This is the last question that we have right now. How do I gain the respect of my peers if I am surrounded by alphas?
Well, great question. How do you gain the respect of your peers if you're surrounded by alphas? Alphas mean people who are just, always going to go for the top trophy, always going to push hard, work hard, play hard. It really depends on the environment your boss has created. Culture really matters. A culture of an organization is one thing, but your interaction is with your team. So your boss, your manager, your leader of your immediate team really matters and sets culture for you more so than for the organization. And so if alpha culture is the way to win, you might have to morph a little to alpha culture. And again, what I said in the previous question, if alpha culture is not you, and that's the only way you're going to get recognized, then maybe this isn't the right team for you. Now, on the other hand, I'm going to make a case that in a world of alphas, what's the opposite of alpha? Beta? Or my Greek letter folks, you can be yourself. It's just that if everybody else is an alpha, you will stand out by virtue of not being an alpha. But you have to make sure you don't get drowned out by the noise. So if you're an introvert, for example, in a land of extroverts, and there's some great recent literature that you can read on this, but I think you can stand out. I think introverts are natural good listeners. They're good networkers because it's not all about them. So I think if you're an introvert, for example, I think you can still be a very effective communicator and a very effective networker. So you don't have to become an extrovert. I think you play to your strengths. So I think you have to think about in that alpha world, what do you bring to the table? It may not be fake alphaism. It may be some other kind of skill or some other kind of experience. Maybe you don't speak that often, but when you do, what you say is powerful and people listen to it. So really analyze what it is that you bring to the table and how it compares to what the alphas might bring to the table to see how you can set yourself apart and how maybe you can collaborate, right? Because it's not, it shouldn't always be an individual sport. This should be team, collaboration. We should be working with each other, supporting each other, and that can also help you. If you're partnering with alphas, that can also help you get your message across. But I want you to be comfortable in your own skin and realize what you bring to the table instead of always trying to be like other people. We can learn from others. We can always want to grow and develop, but also we have to realize what it is that we have that's unique. That's part of being authentic. What do we have that's unique, a perspective, a knowledge, or a skill, and how can we best develop that and get better at it and share it with others? So I hope that helps. Amanda, any other questions?
That is all for right now. Thank you very much.
All right. So if you have other questions, you've got my contact information there on the screen. You can go to my website or you can email me, and you're going to get emailed tomorrow with these resources. There will be a 5-question survey that pops up hopefully when we're done with this webinar, so you can have the opportunity to share ideas with us, let us know how this went. As I said, Amy and her team have really worked hard at piloting and beta testing all these ideas as they're coming in, so putting together these programs very quickly in response to alumni need and what people are asking for. So I want to thank them for that. But most of all, I want to thank each and every one of you who took time out of probably a crazy, in a different way, schedule than usual to share some time to focus on your growth and your development, to think about your leadership presence. And I want to leave you with this. Our choice is between panic and calm, and we all have moments where the news brings us to our knees, where we are upset, depressed, sad, and that's normal, that's human, that's what makes us, our capacity to feel, there's nothing wrong with that. I want to encourage us when we come out of those moments to reach out to those around us who might need our help, to friends, to family members, to employees, to team members, who we can support and lift up with a simple call or an email or a note, a cartoon, whatever it is we can do to show people that we're caring. Just because we're physically distancing doesn't mean we cannot be socially connected and doesn't mean we can't lead. I think this crisis, if it shows us anything, is that we have a great human capacity to overcome and to triumph and to connect with each other and support each other in ways we might not have imagined just a few short weeks ago. Leaders will be made or broken during this time of crisis. We will see leaders emerge in our companies and in our world that we might not have seen ordinarily. And I think other leaders will lose their credibility because of how they're handling their situations with their teams or their families or the larger society. And so my wish for you is a very safe and healthy spring, Easter, Passover, whatever your faith tradition or spiritual tradition is, whatever you celebrate, that you enjoy that time even though it is not traditional. We won't be with families seated around a table or celebrating in our houses of religious worship. but I wish you peace and I wish you safety and health, and I look forward to the opportunity to shake your hand, to give you a hug, to see you in person, and I can't wait till the Marist community comes back together in person. But whether we're virtual or in person, once a red fox, always a red fox. So thank you so much, all of you. Thanks to Amy and her team. We'll see you again on the next webinar. Have a great night, everyone.